Everybody, welcome to Comedy on Vinyl. This week, I have Jay Sandrich on the podcast. If you don't know his name, you should. There's too many things to list, but I mean, if we're gonna hammer a few home, Bob Newhart show.
I just did the pilot.
You just did that. Well, but I mean that you set a
I did
standard when you do that.
Yeah, but basically, I only stayed with 3 shows.
Mm-hmm.
I stayed with the Mary Tyler Moore show.
Yeah.
I stayed with a show called Soap. I don't know if and the Cosby show.
And the Cosby show.
I did a lot of pilots. I did Golden Girls.
Yeah.
And when you do pilots, you'll do 2 or 3.
Mm-hmm.
But those 3 shows were the basic ones that I stayed with, and I stayed with them because they were just so much fun. And I loved working on them.
From what I've read too, you're you're not necessarily afraid, and most people would be, to turn stuff down. And you've turned stuff down.
Yeah.
Has there? You don't seem like the kind of guy who has a lot of regrets as far as that goes. But have you ever turned stuff down and then? But you seem to turn stuff down because you're like, I can't do anything with this. Maybe somebody else could.
Well, it's interesting you ask that because that's true. At the height of my career, I don't think I ever did any season more than 2 pilots. Maybe I do 3.
Okay.
But part of the problem for me was I really based everything on writing.
Mm-hmm.
I had to really understand and appreciate the script when I do a pilot. And sometimes the scripts would be wonderful, but I just didn't relate to it.
Okay. And is it a matter of relating to it personally, or just saying, I know that I don't have a vision to attach to this, or I don't have something else to attach to it?
No, it's personal.
Yeah. Okay.
I really like this. I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's interesting because I never think in terms of vision.
Mm-hmm.
A good script really is there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you cast it properly, if it's written well and cast well, it's going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
If it isn't written well, sometimes you can help it be better, but in my feeling, in those days, you couldn't really make it good.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure today whether that philosophy matters or not.
Mm-hmm.
Today, what seems to matter because, and this will go into the networks own the shows.
Yeah.
It really matters is what do they think the ratings are going to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when I was working I was blessed to work with some really wonderful people, but one of the people that I worked with and helped me almost the most of the 3 or 4 people, was Grant Tinker.
Yeah.
And MTM owned a couple shows, and the networks wanted to recast a couple parts. Grant wouldn't do it, fortunately.
That's great.
They became stars.
Did I read they wanted to recast, if I'm not mistaken, Ed Asner, right? And then who else did they? Oh, Rhoda?
Valerie.
Oh my goodness.
And well, it was, the reason was in those days, and I guess they still do it. They test them.
Yeah.
And in the pilot of Mary Tyler Moore, well, everybody knew Mary from the Van Dyke Show, and Ed gets a little drunk and yells at her, and Valerie wants her apartment. So audiences I'm sure they wouldn't have liked anybody.
Sure, okay, I guess I can see that.
But the network didn't own the show.
Yeah.
And Grant said, absolutely not. And there were other shows in those days that networks wanted changes or something. And if the executive, and there was another show I did with Grant that the network wanted to do something different. And he said, no, just don't worry about it. We made the pilot. You don't have to run it. Well, they were going to buy it.
Of course. So
that is really different from today.
Yeah. It has more of a, I don't know, it's odd that it seems that films have gone away from, or maybe they've come back a little bit, but filmmaking has gone away from the studio system, whereas it seems TV maybe has gone in the reverse. Is that accurate? Where maybe when you were originally working in the 50s and 60s and 70s that it was more independent?
Well, no, in those days there were only 3 networks.
Sure. I guess that does change things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't remember what the number was, but the network were only allowed to own a certain percentage, really small percentage
okay.
of a very few shows.
Mm-hmm.
So what would happen is the networks basically were there to entice advertising agencies
Sure.
to buy the shows. When we did Get Smart, when
Mm-hmm.
I produced Get Smart, I can't remember who the sponsor was, but they didn't want to use the lead lady because she'd just done a commercial.
Really?
Yeah, she had done commercials for somebody else.
Sure. Wow.
And, and she went and met with them and said, I'm not going to do any more commercials. But that was really what it was.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I guess it's interesting that it makes sense that the production companies would have a little bit more pull, a little bit more sway,
Much
but
more.
It also takes, but at the same time that is where people are treating this like it's a golden age of television. I don't know how
Now?
you feel about it. Yeah, they really are because of all the drama.
Well, the dramas,
there's
no question for me, the dramas are much better.
Sure, but the comedies
Are not.
totally different for you. Right?
But there was what happens too is there was a time when networks would not buy a pilot if it didn't meet a certain standard. And sometimes they were absolutely wrong. But again, I remember when we did Get Smart, the network wanted somebody else to play the part that Catherine Damon ended up doing. And we didn't want that person, we wanted Catherine Damon. And it came down to the head of the network saying to me, you really want her, so I have to let you have her, but if it fails, it's on you guys.
Yeah.
But it didn't fail. She was wonderful.
But
it was always a little bit of a problem unless you just took the people they wanted.
Yeah.
When we did the Mary Tyler Moore Show, what happened was a different head of the network, the head of the comedy in the networks, bought the idea of Mary doing a show based upon she had done a separate show with Dick and had gotten very good ratings. So, but he did not like the script. He wanted to replace the writers.
Okay.
He didn't like anything about it. And it was scheduled, to the best of my memory, it was scheduled like for 7:30 on a Wednesday night, opposite a very successful show. And just before the season opened, CBS replaced him and brought in a new head of production.
Wow.
And they loved the show.
Okay.
And so they moved it, and they gave it a shot. But it still was a worry, so there was always in the back of our minds, and I know exactly what show was supposed to take its place if it didn't work.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording that, and I read this about you as well, is that you don't look at yourself as a funny person or a comedic mind,
No.
and that you're a director first, and that we've talked about how you say the writing and the casting need to be in place, and that's where
Right.
you pull it. But I do wonder what you're drawing from to help to make sure that stuff does blend well.
Well, what happened? My career. Shall I go back and
Let's do it. I mean, we can go back to.
I was in the Army.
Yeah.
I was, I don't know. I guess I was 22, and I was assigned to make training films. I didn't know what I was doing.
Of course.
But, I graduated from UCLA Motion Pictures, and I'm about to get out of the Army, and in those days you spent 2 years in the Army and got out. And I decided that I would like to go work for Desilu Productions.
Yeah.
They did Lucy and a bunch of other comedies. So I wrote a letter to the production manager saying, I'm in the Army. When I get out, I'd love to come to work for you. And he replied, call me when you get out. So I get out, I call him, and we set up an appointment. And I go talk to him, and maybe we talked. My memory is maybe we talked for 15, 20 minutes. And he said, when can you start? oh my God, I can start Monday.
Yeah.
and it turned out, which I didn't know, I died when I was 13 when my father died.
Okay.
And he had been a film director. He'd done Stair Rogers pictures and Holiday Inn. Yeah, he'd done some really wonderful pictures. Mm-hmm. But I was too young to really know the people. Mm-hmm. Well, it turned out this production manager had been his assistant. So that was the reason I got the job. And so I'm now the second assistant director on I Love Lucy, Armis Brooks, and I can't remember the third show. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know what I was doing.
Sure, so and doing 3 shows at the same time.
Yeah, and I think I did like 4 or 5 shows on Lucy, and then the season ended, and I went to work at another studio. Mm-hmm. And I get a phone call from this wonderful man named Jack Allworth, who was the first assistant director on Lucy, and he'd been promoted to the associate producer. And he said, would you like to come back to work? I said, oh, gosh. He said, okay, well, you're going to be the first assistant director, and I'll see you in a week. So I go home and I tell my then wife, he must have made a mistake because he said I was going to be the first assistant. Well, what had happened is they promoted him to associate producer, and I guess because Lucy's first picture was with my father, they made me the first assistant. Wow. Which is a tremendously big job.
Of course, yeah.
And I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea.
Still.
But this wonderful Jack Allworth sort of wet-nursed me, and even though he was no longer the first, he would sort of teach me what to do.
Yeah.
So now I'm 24, 25, I don't remember, but I'm the first assistant on I Love Lucy, which is the #1 show in the nation.
Yeah. How many years into the show's run was this?
I'm sorry?
How many years into the show's run was it?
Well, it was the last year of the half hour.
The last year, okay.
And then we did 3 years of hour shows.
Oh, right.
Which is even worse.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I don't know. I mean, there's so much an assistant director has to do when you're on location, and these were big shows. Anyhow, somehow I survived, and then Desi, who I really loved, but became the director, and he was also drinking at that point.
Okay.
And it was really impossible to get things accomplished when your director is not paying attention to anything. And so I'm walking down the street of the studio, and I run into a wonderful producer named Sheldon Leonard, who was doing a show called Danny Thomas. And I said to him, I'm leaving the Lucy show if you ever need a first assistant. And he said, and here's where life is interesting, well, my assistant just left to go do a feature, so I do need a first. So, I mean, it was just all wonderful. And so I went to work with Sheldon and Danny Thomas, and I was his assistant when we did the Van Dyke show, and we did the Andy Griffith show. And I was very involved in those things. Wow. And one of the things, at some point in the Danny Thomas show, Sheldon decides he didn't want to direct anymore, he was just going to produce. And Danny said, well, I'll direct. But what happens is the director does the cameras. He stages the scene, he does the cameras. So in the morning, when it came time to do the cameras, Danny rehearsed the first scene, and he said, I'll be in my office, call me. So I wasn't prepared, but I ended up doing cameras.
Wow.
And then we did a pilot, who I can't remember the name of the pilot. I know the director, wonderful director, but he was a film director. He'd never done 3 cameras, and I did the cameras for him. And a couple of years later, I have no job, and I'm walking down the street, and I see another man who really influenced my life named Leonard Stern. And I said, and he had produced the show where I had done the cameras. And I said, I'm available if you need anybody. He said, yeah, it's interesting. I just got a script yesterday that probably I'm going to do, but it isn't definite. But read it and see what you think. So he gave me this script, which was obviously an hour and a half. It was way too long, but it was a wonderful script. So I read it, and I come in Monday and say, this is a terrific script, but I think we have to cut this and this and this and this. And he said, good idea. And and that was Get Smart. So he made me the producer on Get Smart. And so I produced it for a year. Was not happy producing, but I went with Buck Henry to produce a show he wrote, and that only lasted half a season. So now I'm really sort of out of work.
Yeah.
And Leonard Stern calls me up and said, I'm just sold another pilot called He and She with Dick Benjamin and Paula Prentice, and I'd like you to direct it. So that was really the start of my career.
Yeah.
I really knew cameras, but I didn't know how to work with actors.
Yeah.
And I'd never taken classes or anything. And to this day, I'll never forget, we did a scene and Dick Benjamin said to me, well, why am I saying that? And I said, because if you say this, then Paula can say that, and that's where the joke is.
Yeah.
He said, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in why is my character saying this? Well, your character's saying it because if you don't say this, then Paula's character can't. He said, no. Why is my character saying it? So we spent, 5-10 minutes talking and came up with another line that worked for him and the character and still got the joke. Well, I learned a lot from that one moment.
Yeah.
And so that show, I stayed on that show, and that lasted a season. And then I get a call from Grant. They're doing Mary Tyler Moore. They wanted John Rich, who had directed Mary and done a couple of years, first year of the Van Dyke Show.
Okay.
Wanted him to direct, but he was doing All in the Family.
Okay.
So he chose All in the Family over the Mary Show, which I can't blame him. And thank God for me, they had seen He and She, and I'd been the assistant on the Van Dyke Show, so Mary basically knew me.
Yeah.
And Grant knew me, but they didn't really know me as a director.
Yeah.
But basically because of He and She, they decided to give me a shot at it.
That's crazy. What for that first directing gig though? I mean, it seems so just sort of you kind of just glazed over. It's like, oh, I want you to direct this. What made him think you could direct?
Well, I had worked with him, and I had directed a Danny Thomas show. Without Danny wasn't in it. I directed a couple shows. And then the last show we did together, I had directed one or two of those. Actually, Don Knotts was I don't mean Don Knotts, I mean Don from Get Smart.
Oh, Don Adams.
Don Adams.
Okay.
Right.
So then there may be some obvious questions to ask, but I'll get them out of the way. I mean, again, you're only 13 when your father passes away.
Right.
You probably weren't familiar with his work, right, at all? Little bits? Or?
Well, the only thing I remember was when he did Holiday Inn. He invited me to the studio. Now, I'm a California kid. I've never been in the snow. And it's snowing. And he says, you want to go play in the snow? I'm now 10 at that point, I think. And of course, I went running over, and it was plastic. But that's what I remember. No, I knew what he was. I knew he was a film director, and I'd seen the shows, but I didn't really appreciate it.
Right.
But what happened is, it came time to go to college, and I didn't know what to do. And UCLA had a film school. So I said, okay, I'll go to film school.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and that's when what happened. Now, this story, it doesn't happen anymore, but my father had been president of the Guild at one point. And I get a phone call when I'm like a junior from somebody who worked at the Guild and had worked there when he was there and had been very fond of him, and said, as you know, the Directors Guild will allow sons of members in to become assistant directors. Okay. Not daughters, but just sons. But they're changing it. They're going to have, the new assistant directors are going to have to take tests. Okay. So if you want to get in, if you want to be an assistant director, you better get in. Sure. So now I'm a junior at UCLA. I get in and I get a job as an assistant to a second assistant. And, I don't do much, but I at least learned a little.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Do you know, I mean, sometimes we get a little too inside baseball with comedy and breaking it apart too much. But do you know where does your sense of humor come from? Where does your ability to be able to break down comedy and find out what's good to you come from?
Well, I mean, my father certainly had done some comedies. They were musicals, but they were comedy. And I guess my mother certainly had a really good sense of humor. I don't know. I have no idea. But what I do know is that I only got it because in those days you could stay with it, and I figured I'd always be an assistant.
Okay.
I like doing audience shows. I like being involved with comedy shows, but I never thought that I was going to be a director.
Yeah.
But because of people like Sheldon Leonard and Leonard Stern and Grant Tinker, I was lucky enough to do it.
So for you, it seemed like exposure was the thing.
Yeah, it was.
I got enough of this. No, this will work. I know it'll work because I've seen it fail. I've seen what fails. I've seen what works.
You either understand what works in comedy or you don't. And I mean, there are a lot of directors who are not comedy directors who've done comedy, but that's not necessarily their main interest. But that's what really worked for me, was making audiences laugh.
Yeah. Do you see? And that's the other thing too. Is there are people, and this is where egos come into play of both writers and actors. And again, I'm not judging the people you've worked with, but I'm saying they very much want to eat that up, and they want to think they're responsible for it. It's my words that made them laugh. It was my acting that made them laugh. As a director, you have to just tear your ego off for a bit, don't you? I mean,
well, it's very interesting because there is such a difference between audience shows. In those days, we were doing audience shows. They don't do as many today. But there's such a difference between audience shows and one camera. One camera, as a director, maybe if you're lucky, there'll be a reading of the script.
Right.
And the writers will do some rewriting. But basically, you're shooting what you're given. And sometimes you can add a little something, or a scene doesn't work. You may call the writers up and say, this scene isn't working at all. What if we tried? And they'll say no, or Yeah. But on an audience show, you get the script, you read it, and you discuss it. Then the writers, if it's a scene or two don't work, they'll go rewrite those scenes, and you'll work with the actors on other scenes. And you basically have 3 whole days of rehearsal.
Yeah.
And then you do 1 day for cameras, and then you shoot the show. But what I found was 2 things. Number one, if you get a good script but don't cast it right, it's not going to work. If you get a wonderful cast and the script isn't really good, it usually doesn't work. It'll get by, but it won't be a good show. So what you have to do as a director is sort of get in the middle, because sometimes certain actors, it wasn't this way, it was certainly with Mary, but it was certainly that way with certain actors who would not want to confront the writers.
Okay.
And they'd say, to me, when we were rehearsing, I don't understand what this line means. And you'd say what you're interpreting, well, I don't like this line. So, but then the writers would come down, and I would always say, I'm having a little trouble with this line. I never say the actor is.
Okay, yeah.
And sometimes they would say to the actor, do you have trouble with this? And the actor would say, oh, yeah, a little bit, but don't worry about it.
Of course.
Or, yeah, I'm having a little trouble. But it was never the actor versus the writers. It was always me in between.
Yeah.
And certain shows, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
Certain shows, it was not difficult.
Right.
But that was one of the things that I felt was really important on an audience show, is that you keep the writers and the actors healthy and happy with each other.
Yeah, of course.
One camera sometimes, an actor would say, I'm not going to say this line.
Yeah.
And so you'd either come up with another line or you'd call the writers.
Right.
And then the writers sometimes would say, you tell that actor, blah, blah, blah. But you didn't want that to happen with audience shows.
Sure. This might be a little bit of industry talk. It is going to be industry talk. But what's the reason for either sticking around or someone wanting you to stick around when you, I mean, because you shot pilots of a lot of shows that I really love.
Right.
And you've worked on a lot of shows that I really love. And Mary Tyler Moore is, it has to be in my top 10 favorite shows of all time. But what happens where you shoot the pilot for Bob Newhart and you don't shoot the rest?
Well, I was doing the Mary Tyler Moore show.
You're just going to, so you just moved on to that.
I was there for the 8 years that the show was done.
Yeah.
And what would happen is MTM would come up with a pilot and ask me when we, usually the pilots would happen when you finish the season and they'd be looking for shows for the next season, so you'd make the pilot like in March and April, February and March, depending on when you finish Mary. The biggest problem I ever had, and it was a real problem, was when Mary Tyler Moore finally finished, there was a pilot for somebody who I love dearly to this day, Betty White. And the writers were two of the producers of Mary Tyler Moore shows.
Okay.
Ed Weinberger and Stan Daniels, who I had great respect for. But they hadn't done a script. They were still working, finishing up Mary, and they hadn't gotten a script. At the same time, I get a script from a show called Soap that I read. Now, I had worked with Susan Harris and Paul Witt, Tony Thomas. I'd done a pilot for them. So I really liked them, and I knew how good a writer I thought Susan was. And I read the script for Soap, and I thought, this can be one of the most embarrassing shows ever done. It's not cast right, or really interesting if it's cast right. But I had to make this decision. So it comes down to, I had to tell Betty that I'm not going to do her show. And that was hard.
I bet.
That was very hard. And I was gambling, because I'm coming off the Mary Tyler Moore show and I'm going on to a show that's so opposite. It's just has such an opposite type of show, but one that I really felt if we cast it right, it was going to be good.
Yeah.
And I think we did cast it right, and I think it was good. I stayed with it for 2.5 seasons, and then I think it did 4.
4, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But it was probably one of the most fun shows I've ever worked on.
I can't imagine. And that was shot on tape too, right?
That was tape, actually.
And most of the stuff you did was filmed.
All the stuff.
Everything.
Well, I do tape shows, but what happened was, and it was very interesting, I went out and hired a film cameraman who had never done tape. And most people thought that Soap was a film show.
Yeah, I had no idea until I read that the other day. I mean, that's something actually that's forward-thinking enough that's the only reason digital's ever caught on is when they finally brought in real cinematographers to make digital stuff look amazing.
And I'm not being critical, but Norman shows were all done like for TV. A lot of lighting and not a lot of moments of darkness and things like that. But Soap was a film as far as I was concerned.
Right.
Although we did it, and I also was the first person that I know of who used 4 cameras. So if I had used 4 cameras on Mary on occasion when we had a lot of extras or I couldn't cover a scene completely. But Soap was the first time that shows used 4 cameras.
This just occurred to me, and this is probably a second unit thing, but the opening of the Mary Tyler Moore show, did you shoot?
No.
Was that?
No, those were done in Minneapolis.
Yeah, but so it was all second unit stuff then?
I can't think of the wonderful, wonderful cameraman, director who shot the opening.
It's just one of the more memorable openings.
Yeah,
so I just thought I would check. It's so good. And,
and then they went back about 4 or 5 years later to reshoot the unit that was supposedly Mary's unit, and people wouldn't let them.
Really?
Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
Because people were stopping, ringing the doorbell and saying, is Rhoda here? Is Mary?
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, but that speaks to the power of it. I mean...
Yeah. It became that house, there was just a house that they borrowed, became really well known.
Yeah. Did you have... I'm curious then about this, for Mary Tyler Moore, her show. Did you have any interest in the show? And when I say politically, I think you know what I mean. Just that it was a lot about feminism, and that it was that of interest to you, or was it more just funny?
It was, but it never started out to be that.
Okay.
We never, including the writers, never thought in those terms.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you who probably had the most to do with it was Valerie Harper.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, Mary, God love her, was very happily married, didn't think in those terms.
Sure.
Valerie was happily married too, but she thought more as a woman. And I remember her saying, to Mary, you shouldn't say that line. Don't say that line.
Wow.
And gradually, we all sort of realized, once the show was on too, this was having an effect on an audience.
Yeah.
The network did not want Mary to have an affair, because she'd been in the original script. She had I can't remember, but it was a big deal, and she breaks up with the guy she had spent 3 years with, helped him through college.
Right.
But I can't remember. I just remember that was a really big problem that the network had.
Was there originally some sort of infidelity was written into it? Is that what you're saying? Oh, okay. But instead it was just he was kind of a load, and she had to get rid of him.
Yeah. But she was ready to marry him, but not really.
Right.
But no, it was during the times where women were, as I said, I was asked, I was offered the ability to join the Directors Guild, and women couldn't get in.
Right.
But yeah, it was the beginning, I think, in many ways of women's lib. Not that we did it.
Sure, no,
it was
but
happening,
it was definitely there.
Yeah, and we had wonderful writers, and Jim and Alan eventually, and I don't remember when, but very early on started hiring women writers. And I think it was one of the first shows where a lot of women were working on the scripts.
Yeah. So that it was from the get-go.
Oh yeah, but it didn't start that way.
Sure.
It didn't start that way, but probably I think, the shows usually in those days were picked up for like 12 shows.
Okay.
And then it either gets picked up or dropped. So I think probably after the 12th show, that's when they started bringing in female writers.
Yeah. I was thinking about this today. There is a show, and it might not be up your alley, but there's a show on IFC called Comedy Bang Bang. It's very strange. Okay, it's out of its mind weird, and it takes a certain mindset to appreciate it. I love it, but I just found out that they're shooting for this year. I don't know when the last time I heard this was 40 episodes of a weekly show.
In 1 year?
In 1 year.
Oh.
And I can't think of the last time I've heard of a show doing more than 25. And that kind of blew my mind, except for like Phil Silvers, which is one of my other top 10.
Oh, yeah. God,
they did like
that.
50 or 60 episodes, or not 50 or 60, but about 50.
So it's hard for me today. Number one, I find, this is me, I find the shows are aimed basically at young audiences, which we didn't do. We didn't aim the shows at young audiences. We always felt we're shooting for adults, and if the kids don't get a joke, they don't get it.
Right.
But we're not lowering our levels. And I find most of the shows on the networks today are aimed, I don't mean young kids, but I mean certainly in their early 30s and 20s. Very sexual, which is fine, but it's not what I always find terribly funny.
Of course.
But Gallivant is the one show that my wife and I started watching, and it's not like any show I ever did. It's silly. The music is wonderful, but what gets me is the cast and the writing.
Yeah.
I just love the man who plays the king.
Yes.
I just think
Tim Amundsen is great. Yes.
He's really brilliant.
He really is.
And they sing and dance. So anyhow, that's the one comedy that I watched today.
Yeah, and we just my wife and I just started watching it last week, and we need to start watching more. I mean, it's too bad it's limited. Yes, please do.
You've got to go back to the beginning.
Yeah, we did. We started watching it from the beginning. Luckily, because I don't have regular cable anymore. It's all online. So,
right.
But yeah, so good.
Go back to the very beginning, because we also discovered 2 years ago Parenthood. Which for some reason we never watched. And somebody said to us, well, you really should watch Predator. So we got it online. And now we're in the middle of the second season. And just love it.
Yeah.
Just think it's so well written.
Do you enjoy just the ability to binge watch, as people like to say? Do you like to just watch episode after episode, or is it no? You just like take your time with it?
We'll watch maybe 2 episodes.
Maybe 2, okay. Yeah.
But then, there's enough dramatic shows. And, we always watch Jon Stewart. And so there's always something. We don't live to watch television.
Sure.
But that's another thing. When I was working, there wasn't that. You watched the show. If you didn't see it on, you probably weren't going to see it for another 6, 7 weeks, 8 weeks.
Right.
So people would watch the family get together and watch a show.
Yeah.
Which made life really different.
Right. It actually occurs to me too, though. I guess most of the shows you've worked on, you're lucky in a way that they were all the shows that ended up being preserved, and we didn't lose like the kinescopes of I Love Lucy or any of that kind of stuff dropped out of.
Well, they were all film.
Yeah,
they were all film except for Soap. I mean, that I basically did. I did some other tape shows. I guess I'm trying to think about Golden Girls. Was that tape?
Good question.
No, I think that was film.
That was film too?
Yeah.
Okay. Again, one of my favorite shows.
Yeah.
And then, if you don't mind, you mind me skipping back to pretty far? Okay.
Ask me one question, though, while I think of it. What happened was when Soap finished, I'm lucky enough, my agent said, "Do you want to do films?" I said, "Well, the writing has to be pretty good." And so I get a phone call. Well, would you be interested in doing a Neil Simon script with Goldie Hawn and Chevy Chase? And I said, "Oh yeah, I'd be interested in that."
Yeah.
So I was very fortunate, but it was interesting because I read the script, and I just finished doing Soap, and now this is Neil Simon, and it's a wonderful script. But I remember thinking, yeah, he writes as good as Susan. I'm serious. And I had a wonderful time working with Goldie and Chevy, and Neil, who I just adore, we became really good friends for a while. But what happened is I sat around a lot.
Okay.
When you're doing a film in those days, the cameraman would pull all the lights down, and even if you got a master shot and you go for an over shoulder, all the lights would come down and you start relighting.
Yeah.
So I found myself spending an awful lot of time during the day not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then I had one other script right afterwards I got that I liked, and it was about a young guy and his father and I can't remember the whole concept, but they have a vineyard up in Northern California, and they raise grapes that makes certain wines, and there's a big show in New York, and the young man goes back, and it gets very involved. And I wanted John Ritter.
Okay.
And I love John Ritter. One of the things I did we did a pilot with him, and he was in every show I ever did. So practically. But anyhow, none of the studios wanted John Ritter.
Okay.
And eventually, they decided that they were going to do, the actor from Saturday Night Live, the original, the comedian who died.
John Belushi?
John Belushi. And Belushi couldn't make up his mind. He eventually decided, okay, I'll do this film, but I want to have the ability to rewrite it to work.
Okay.
It didn't work for him, obviously.
Right.
So when that happened, he went away to write, and I sort of wasn't happy with what I was hearing back. And so I said to my agent, I'm not going to do this show. And they said, well, at least wait till he turns the script in.
Okay. So
then I wasted another 4 or 5 months of my life. And the script was no good, and unfortunately he died of an overdose.
Right.
But it really been, I'd say, 2 years of not doing a lot.
Yeah.
So I get a phone call from Whit Thomas, we're doing a pilot. Would you do it?" And I said, "Yes." So I went back happily to television.
Yeah. It's tough being picky, but I mean, you seemed like you have made a lot of tough decisions.
Well, they weren't tough.
No.
I mean, Seems Like Old Times was a successful film. I could have stayed in film if I'd wanted to.
Sure.
But I found that I like working all the time.
Yeah.
And I found that working with actors that are going out in front of an audience was more to my satisfaction than saying to an actor, "Yeah, that's really funny, let's move on."
Yeah. The immediacy of the response and not just a lot of people.
Loved seeing how things were going to work in front of an audience.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just blinding myself.
Do you want to move?
No, it's fine. Good idea. Let me do that.
Now, I've worked with some wonderful comedians, but most of them are no longer doing comedy.
Sure. I mean, so let's talk a little bit then. So you didn't really listen to much comedy then at all as a kid. I mean, when you're a kid, what would you have been exposed to?
Jack Benny,
Benny.
The radio.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Radio.
Sure.
Jack Benny and Fred Allen, that type of show. And then they had 15-minute spy adventure type shows like they still have.
Yeah.
But it was all radio.
Did you ever, so I guess at this point, by the time comedy records became the industry they are because of Bob Newhart, because of the Button Down Mind, you were already working in TV and probably weren't picking up new comedy influences necessarily.
No, I would be asked to look at certain people. But having worked with Newhart, I did the pilot and a couple of others. I just found he was so interesting because rehearsals, he just would sort of mumble his way through. And I remember in the pilot, he has a phone call, and that's what Bob Newhart was famous for, was phone calls. And one of the writers, we did an audience show about 3 nights before the real show, just see what was working on. And one of the writers said to me, talk to him because he's not doing the phone call. Well, I said, "It's not Bob Newhart." I know, but it's not the way we wrote it. So I said, "Bob, one of the writers, he really isn't happy with the phone call." He said, "Oh, is this the show tonight that we did?" I said, "No, we're going to do that Friday." He said, "Well, let's wait till Friday."
I had a feeling.
Yeah.
That's so good.
And of course, Suzanne Plachette was so wonderful to work with. It was a lot of fun.
Was there ever any pressure to work on those shows that you're setting a template for the show, or no?
You don't think of those terms. I mean, Bob Newhart. Who wouldn't want to work with Bob Newhart?
Of course.
And I didn't. I didn't set anything. I just was lucky enough to be there, and I guess because of my experience with audience shows, I didn't worry a lot about him. I knew he was funny, and I knew when the audience was there, he'd do it. When we did Mary Tyler Moore Show, we filmed 3 nights before, before we shot the show, and it was a disaster. The sound didn't work. It was really hot. The air conditioning wasn't right, and it was just awful.
Yeah.
No laughs. Nothing worked.
Oh boy.
And I remember to this day sitting in Jim and Alan's office with Grant was there and me and the script supervisor. And we're all saying, what do we do? And none of us could think of any writing that would change. We all liked the show. We all felt there were just problems. And there was some acting that had to change, but I still had a whole day, and then the cameras, and then we shoot. And of course, by the time we filmed it, exact same show. I don't think we rewrote anything, maybe one line.
Wow.
It worked.
Yeah.
But it was scary.
And from what I understand, you like to shoot 2 shows a day, right?
Yeah.
See, that's not usual, is it, at all?
It was at the time.
It was? Okay.
Well, it wasn't usual on film shows because it was too expensive.
Okay.
but it was usual on tape shows because you reuse the tape.
Sure.
But what I liked about it is, number one, you certainly found out certain things that the actors did right, and certain things they didn't do right, and certain things maybe could be rewritten. It was a much younger audience, but you'd still use things from that show. When I was doing the Cosby Show, a lot of scenes, sometimes we would use moments from the afternoon and intercut them with the evening show.
Okay. Yeah, let's talk about the Cosby Show, because actually, you know what? Let's skip back one, because I love that show too. But I did want to talk about, since you did direct not just the pilot and a bunch of Mary Tyler Moore, but also the series finale, right?
Of Mary?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I did 3/4 of the show.
Probably. I'm sure it's on top 5 lists of greatest final episodes of all time. It's my favorite.
I must say the writers did a brilliant job.
Oh, they did.
What happened, interestingly enough, I'd say in the middle of the season, we were not getting along. None of us. The cast wasn't, and I wasn't getting along with the writers. And we finally had a meeting. And it was Ted Knight, interestingly enough, who said, "You're all just nervous because the show's ending." And we thought about it and said, you're right. So we come to the last show, and we don't get the last scene. They don't write it. And we don't get the last scene. And finally, the final day of rehearsal, we get the last scene. But it doesn't quite work. It's... Number one is I remember Betty wasn't in the scene, and I'm not sure whether Georgia Engel was in the scene, but it just didn't all work.
Yeah.
It wasn't there. So we rehearsed, and we brought them down, the writers down, and we showed them the scene. And I remember talking to Jim and Alan, saying, I think we got to have the whole cast in, and maybe we can try this or that.
Yeah.
And so the next day, which the cameras are there, and I'm doing blocking on early part of the show, and we get the last scene. So I give the cameras a 20-minute break, and we start rehearsing the scene. And of course, it's wonderful. And Ed Asner does his line, I love all you people, whatever that line is. I can't remember the line. And we all just look around and the tears are coming down everybody's eyes. And I said to Ed, don't do the line again. Just say it, but don't have any emotion. And I said to Mary, the one bit of directing, I said, try not to cry until, as long as you can, hold the tears back. And then, so we show it to the writers, and I said, Ed's not going to do his line, and Mary's not going to cry. And then we did the scene in front of an audience. And of course, it was really wonderful. And at the very end, Mary walks out the door of the audience and turns the lights off. But what happened is the man who was on the lights was so involved in the scene, he forgot to turn them off.
My goodness.
But I fortunately had done enough shows to know I didn't have to do the whole scene again. I just did the exit again.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was a killer for us.
Yeah.
And then we saw the show. We all got together to watch it. But by that time, I think, it had been 5-6 weeks. So the emotion wasn't completely there, but it was tough.
Gosh, because the family environment, not wanting to write that last scene is like not wanting to bury the body.
No, and what they did is, Jim and Alan, we had 2 other writers who would always be there. We would come for the run-throughs to see it, and they worked on it, and a couple of other writers. So it was I wasn't there, obviously, but it was sort of a group scene, that last scene.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was very emotional, obviously.
Of course. So then let's skip forward to what we were talking about a second ago. Then, so let's talk about the Cosby Show a little bit. So
what happened there was Marcy Carsey had been in charge of comedy at ABC when we did Soap.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had such great respect for each other. I mean, she was the first network person who didn't try to tell us what lines and how to make scenes work. She just asked questions. Are you getting what you really want here, or whatever? And I just really loved working with her, and I think she appreciated me. So I get a phone call from her saying we're going to do the Cosby. They picked the Cosby Show up,
Mm-hmm.
but they now decided they want to just do a couple of scenes, like 10 minutes, to show the networks around the country what the show might look like.
Okay.
I said, well, so do we have a script? And they said, no. And I said, well, look, I can't do it without a script. I got to say, well, you can do it because it's not going on the air and we really want blah, blah, blah. So I say, okay. And I come to work the next day because I think Soap had just finished, or I had just finished a pilot. Oh, yeah, I just done WKRP.
Oh, shoot.
I think.
Uh-huh.
And so, I don't remember. Anyhow, so the writers they wanted, Bill didn't get along with.
Mm-hmm.
Bill wanted to be a limousine driver in New York, married to an Hispanic woman who could speak Spanish.
Okay.
And they had met with Bill, and they wanted to do his life from his records.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they talked him into it.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have a script, and we're getting nearer and nearer. So I had suggested Ed Weinberger, who I had worked with on the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but I also worked with him on the Cosby. Bill Cosby had an earlier show.
Oh, right, yeah.
And Ed really had done most of that. So they brought Ed in to write basically just a 15-minute couple of scenes based on Bill's records.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to cast, and we don't have a script. So Tom Warner and I go back to New York, and we start looking for actors. And they're looking for actors in L.A. And we're reading from Madeline Kahn, which was a show Tom and Marcy did.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids are reading from some kid show. Nothing from the Cosby Show.
Yeah.
And Bill really doesn't want to have a young kid because he knows, they can be trouble. But it was written there's a young boy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Keisha comes in, and I think she was 4.
Oh my goodness.
But I just thought this kid is sensational.
Yeah.
That's why she was called Rudy, because it was written for a boy.
Mm-hmm.
And Felicia, who was doing a Broadway show, not Golden Girls, she was doing a Broadway show based upon singers, female singers.
Okay.
And so we talked, and she said, I have to go because I have to do the show. It was the afternoon, but I'll be back around 5. And I was sure she was going to be wonderful. She hadn't read the script. But I was afraid if she was, and I asked her if she could do some Spanish, she'd say, no, I don't speak Spanish.
Uh-huh.
She gave a great reading, and I asked her very hesitantly, can you speak Spanish? And she ripped off some long sentences and said, I was raised in Houston, so I know how to speak.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
But she had heard, I heard later from her that she had learned that the character is supposed to speak Spanish, so she had done some. So they came out here, and we put the show together, and we filmed 15, 20 minutes with the same cast that ended up doing it.
Really?
Yeah. The show gets picked up, and Bill decides he wants to do New York, and I turned it down because I don't want to move to New York. But my wife, who was an ex-New Yorker, said, we can, if we're in New York, we can go visit New England, we can go to the Caribbean, and that got me, Caribbean? We can go to the Caribbean? Oh, okay. Well, I only had to do 12 weeks.
There you go.
So that was all I was planning to do, was the first 12. But of course, it was very, very difficult when we first began for several reasons. Number one, The studio we went to was an old studio and nothing worked. Cameras were breaking down all the time.
No.
And Grant Tinker, who just is the best, at the time was head of NBC Comedy.
Oh, right.
But we were using NBC cameras that were breaking down. And I called him up and I said, we can't use these cameras. He said, you've got to use them. I said, no, the show keeps being stopped in the middle. So fortunately, it took a lot of courage, but he allowed us to use the Kigamis. And that was a problem. Plus, we had a writer who, Ed Weinberger didn't want to do the show. So we had a writer who did the first 6 shows and was supposed to keep going, but he quit. And then they kept bringing in other writers. Well, you can't just all of a sudden do the show. But we were fortunate enough to have one young writer, John Marcus, who was working on the show, and he saved us. He had written a script just before the other producer had quit, and we had at least a week of a wonderful script. And then John, the next season, became the producer.
Oh, wow.
So John Marcus saved us. But, it was a lot of fun.
So you had to make the move for 3 years?
I was not doing directing as much as I was doing editing.
Okay.
Because Bill didn't really believe in rehearsing scenes, and he changed a lot of lines, so I had to find ways to make the show work.
Okay.
How to film it and put it together.
Yeah.
So that's basically what I did.
See, that's the interesting other thing. If you're dealing with somebody who's a comedian, I think that might be a common comedian thing because they like to riff. They like to just be there off the top of their heads. So,
right. And Bill too is very inventive. But so when we did rehearse, the most he'd do was rehearse a scene once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
So it was tough on the kids. It was tough.
Right, yeah.
But there was a spontaneity to it. And he came alive when there was an audience there, like Newhart.
Sure.
He'd try. It wasn't that he was not trying, but there was such a difference between performance for an audience. That's why I always loved doing audience shows.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And if it weren't for Felicia, I don't know how to put the shows together because I kept cutting away to her.
Uh-huh. Because she's off Broadway.
And the kids, but she's so wonderful. And then the kids were terrific, but, Keisha was 5, maybe, and would fall asleep in the middle of a show.
Oh, no, that's adorable.
Yeah, but it was a great experience. And then I think I did it for about 3 years, and then came back here. And Grant Tinker started his own company and asked me to partner in it. So,
wow.
But I said I'll only do it if I can go back and do Cosby's.
Right.
So I'd go back once a month and do 2 shows.
Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't leave that.
Yeah. That's crazy. Did you ever have... I'm curious because there never seemed to be an issue with that show, and I rarely like to talk about, because I don't really care about race as far as it's presented on TV, as long as people are treated as equals. But was there ever any kind of, I don't know, any weird pressure from the network regarding how the show's put together? No?
The biggest problem was Bill saying, we need an Indian in this show. You use the Japanese. Bill always wanted all different people.
To push it. Okay,
yeah.
Interesting.
We never discussed race. One time I said, Bill, I think we really have to get serious about drugs. And he didn't want to do it, but we did a show where somehow Malcolm comes home and they find a cigarette, a pot, I think.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But it isn't his. It's a friend's.
Right.
But we never really got serious about any major problem.
Yeah.
But that was Bill. Bill wanted to keep an entertaining show.
Of course.
We didn't, that was...
How about the series finale of that? Did you do the series finale of Cosby or no? Okay, because I remember distinctly, that was one of the first times when I was aware as a kid of reading something where I remember reading that Bill said, we don't want to end this on some weird note. No. We want it to just be another episode.
He came up with the idea of dancing off the studio.
Which would, I guess,
but
be
the
one
hard
thing,
see, now, it was interesting because Bill never really dealt with emotion. And the last scene is what actually happened with his son. This was before his son was killed.
Sure.
That he, and what a great kid Bill's son was. Bill and his wife's kid was just a great, great kid. Anyhow, he is autistic. No, he has trouble reading.
Oh, dyslexic.
Dyslexic, thanks. And Bill didn't know it.
Uh-huh.
And I remember Bill on the phone with him saying, "What do you mean you failed? You really knew it last night. What happened?" And then when he got into college, they found out he was dyslexic. And so the character, his son, becomes dyslexic. And when he graduates school, which is the last show, he and Bill have this wonderful dialogue about how difficult it was and how proud Bill is. And Bill said, "Now let Felicia do that." So he never really dealt with serious problems. Felicia would do the dialogue.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, but it was not a terribly emotional show.
Sure.
For us.
Sure. But I will say, like, from an audience perspective, the emotion you felt was like, oh, this is nice and warm and wonderful all the time, and that was where it was. You know?
The lead characters dance off the set out the door. I mean, what a wonderful, different idea.
It's so good.
But that's Bill.
Yeah.
That was Bill.
Well, it's if nothing else, it's wonderful to. I think it's wonderful that you've been part of all these episodes, or all these different shows that are these different moments of joy. It's just such a strong. I don't like to use the word legacy, but it's a strong body of work.
Well, it's interesting too, because when I look back, I did a movie for television with Jack Lemmon when he was older, that I'll never forget. Working with him, this man was so wonderful.
Yeah.
And he would come in every day completely prepared, and we'd rehearse a scene, and I would say, "Jack, instead of doing it this way, what if you did it that way?" He'd say, "No problem," and switch. I mean, it was just
so amazing.
Wonderful. And I did the first movie with Roz Russell. She'd never done a movie, never done television before. And it was, you're doing a television show. You don't have a lot of time. And the first day, we shoot a scene, and we do it twice, 2 takes, and I said, "Okay, we're moving on." And she said, no, we're not moving on. We got to keep doing this. And Bob, I said, "Okay, I'll do one more." And okay, but Roz, we got to move on. Okay. And by the end of it, she just loved doing 1 or 2 takes, not doing
I bet
10 or 12.
I bet.
I mean, I worked with some really wonderful, wonderful people.
Yeah.
Well,
it's nice too, and that's the other thing too. Is a good way to leave this is if you're going to be fortunate enough to have the kind of opportunities you've had to work on the things that you had the opportunity to work on those things. It's always good to appreciate the people who are there helping you and who are there, doing their part of the work, and it's nice to be kind of the glue to bring it together.
Well, it was a different era.
Sure.
And as I say, there were only 3 networks, and I was pretty much asked to do pilots for all of them. But I had great experiences. I love working with Valerie. I did a show with her. It didn't make it, but it was so much fun working with her, and I don't know. It was a terrific time, and I sort of quit when I couldn't find scripts I wanted to do anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's you can't really ask for anything more than that. I don't think. That's amazing.
I was very lucky.
Oh, that's so good.
Today, it's interesting because I look at television today and I have no idea what I'd be doing.
Right.
Number one, now they're starting to do a few more audience shows, but most of them are one-camera shows.
For sure.
I don't find them funny.
Right. Huh. This has been so much fun. I really appreciate you sitting down and talking.
Well, my pleasure.
This has been great. Everybody, thank you for listening. Jay Sandrich, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jason.
And everybody, as always, have a good thing.
Yeah.
Comedy on Vinyl is a production of Stolen Dress Entertainment. It is produced by Mike Warden and is hosted and edited by Jason Klamm. Our theme song was composed and performed by Richard Levinson. Please visit stolendress.com to listen to our other podcasts, read our blogs, read our tweets, watch our videos, and read our books. Please subscribe on iTunes, and if you like us, give us a 5-star rating and a nice review. You can find us on facebook.com/comedyonvinyl, Twitter @comedyonvinyl, and find everything else at comedyonvinyl.com.